Welcome to the Arlington Street Church podcast. Founded in 1729, Arlington Street continues today as a gathering place for progressive people of faith in the greater Boston area and beyond. We are located at the corner of Arlington and Boylston Streets, across from the Public Garden in Boston, Massachusetts. Please visit ascboston.org for more information about this historic Unitarian Universalist congregation. Arlington Street Church, gathered in love and service for justice and peace.
Friends, I've got two questions for you. Here's the easy one. Do you have a Post-it note? If you do not have a Post-it note, raise your hand. Just a few. Ushers, I'm wondering if you would be able to bring Post-it notes to those folks who need them. We've got a couple of folks up in front and someone back closer to the back raised their hand. Awesome. So, that was the easy question. The more complex one is, what is the most important part of Unitarian Universalism to you? If that's too big a question, just think about what's at the heart of our faith. What keeps you coming back to church? Or if you're here for the first time, what brought you here this morning? When you've got that, what connects in your heart with your faith, write that on your Post-it note. And then you can just stick it on your order of service or the pew in front of you, and we'll come back to it later. Sure, so the two questions, the first one was just, do you have a Post-it note? So you're probably good. Second one is, what is the heart of our faith? What's important about Unitarian Universalism? I ask you this because last year I got to go to a conference with Unitarians and Unitarian Universalists from all around the world, and the theme was, what is the heart of our faith? We spent 3 days talking about it together, and we kind of figured it out. We kind of didn't, which is why I think it's important that we each have our own thing we can connect to, as well as how we connect to the larger faith and the even larger faith that spreads all around our world. This conference was the conference of the International Council of Unitarians and Universalists, and our host community was the Unitarians of the Khasi Hills from northeast India. We'd originally been scheduled to meet there in the Khasi Hills up in India, but unfortunately, like our own country and too many countries around the world, India was experiencing a rise of nationalism. A pro-Hindu nationalist party controlled their government, and as a non-Hindu religious organization, we were unable to get a visa for the conference. They were worried about evangelism, which I can understand. They were also in grips of nationalism. So we went next door to Nepal, met there, and the Indian Unitarians kindly came and hosted us in Nepal. Now, meeting a whole bunch of different people over several days, it gave me this sense of our faith as a mosaic. Each country in this mosaic would be a different stone, this one here, this one there, all of them different sizes, shapes, each with its own glint and color, each important to the whole. And then the mortar filling in, connecting us all to one another. So today I want to tell you about our mosaic, and we are going to actually build it together. So the first stone, and I thank you, Lucy, for your flexibility in building the mosaic. Our first stone is the Unitarian Union of Northeast India, our hosts for the conference. The Indian Unitarian movement is over 125 years old. It was founded by H.K. Singh. He was raised under Calvinist missionaries colonizers. He went to Christian schools, and then as an adult, he came to reject the doctrine of damnation that they had taught him. He said it's just incompatible with the teachings of Jesus. After being introduced to older American Unitarian writings and to his contemporary Unitarians in Britain, he started to correspond with people, and with time, Indian Unitarianism took off. It came to be this thing that was influenced by his own ideas, his own thinking, and then the older thinking of American Unitarians like Channing, who preached from this pulpit here, and Brits who were in conversation with him, as well as the culture of the Kazi Hills, where he was from. So it became this thing, Indian Unitarianism, and it took off, and today there are about 10,000 Unitarians in India. Most live up in the Kazi Hills, that northeast area, but there are several small branches all over the country. In some areas, especially some towns in the Kazi Hills where there are lots of Unitarians, the anniversary of the church's founding is a public holiday. They have parades. My friend sent me a photo. She was on a giant float with a flaming chalice. Another friend, Banjab Nagbri, told me about worship services in the Kazi Hills. Some congregations have professional ordained ministers, but many are entirely lay-led, perhaps enjoying a visit from a regional minister who travels throughout the district. Either way, their worship services sound pretty similar to ours, having different mixes of words and music and prayer. But there was one pretty big difference, which is they have 2 services every Sunday. They'll have a worship service, they'll break and everyone will go to Sunday school, and then they have a whole nother worship service. Indian Unitarianism is a church of seekers. They say we seek to improve ourselves and our wider world. God is a universal spirit that acts as our mother and father so that we might live as siblings together. We are each born with a natural closeness to God, but we kind of lose connection with it through this dirty business of being human. And so through religion, we reconnect with our better original nature. We also practice recognizing that spark of God in one another. I heard the phrase, "No man, no God," as in, to know one another is to know God. I heard that phrase from several Indian Unitarians. As their leader Rupail Lamar said, "We are the imprint of God, a divine spark with the potential to be ever more better." Unitarianism leads to loving what is in the world and to work with joy for justice. Indian Unitarians are working especially on environmental issues like mining and deforestation, working on climate crisis. And they're working on gender issues like violence against women and children and LGBT rights. No man, no God. Do good and return to your original closeness with God. I feel like this sentiment is captured well in the Khasi word kublai. Let's try that together. Kublai, 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 kublai. It has 4 meanings: God, bless you, thank you, and excuse me. So we have our stone from the Indian Unitarians. Another stone in our UU Mosaic is the Unitarian Church of Burundi. It was founded just 15 to 20 years ago by Fulgence and Dagi Jimana. The Unitarian Church of Burundi's initial work wove together community, social justice, and theology. They believe in freedom of conscience and that Jesus was a prophet and a person we can all emulate. To Burundians, not just Unitarian Universalist Burundians, but to Burundians in general, God is in relationships and energy. And so the interdependent web is a core part of Burundian Unitarian Universalist theology because it's a core part of the wider culture. Being in relationship and belonging to community is the foundation of being human. And because we're all linked with each other, because we belong to each other, we are led to work for justice. As Fulgence says, to do good is to become more fully human, is to care for the whole world. Whether we finish the work or not, we know the community continues. This way of religious life was a touchstone for the church as it grew. By 2011, the Church of Burundi had grown to 70 members, had its own building, and satellite congregations. That same year, they ordained Fulgence and called him to continue working with them as their minister. Their justice efforts centered around domestic violence, including running a local program for men who had perpetrated violence, and on national peace issues. In 2015, a new wave of political unrest rocked the country when the president broke the terms of the 10-year National Peace Treaty. After the president broke the peace treaty, Reverend Fulgence and the Unitarian congregations spoke up loudly in support of the restoration of the treaty. The backlash that they faced was terrible. The church was ransacked. Leaders were kidnapped and imprisoned. Fulgence, from prison, was able to contact his congregants when a guard let him use the guard's cell phone. His congregants came and held a vigil outside of the prison where he was being held, at real risk to their own safety. Now, Fulgence cautions us that this was not necessarily an act of bravery or heroism. Rather, people came out because they knew and felt the inextricable ties between their lives and his, between all of our lives. The Burundi Unitarian Universalist sense of God in our relationships sustained them day after day as they sought Fulgence's release. In the end, he was granted asylum in Canada. Now he continues his ministry with the Burundi UUs from afar, and also has a ministry with the local Unitarian Universalists where he has settled. Other members of the Burundi church fled elsewhere. Many are in Rwanda, and they were safe there for a while. But this year, the Rwandan government tightened the legal definition of church and stopped recognizing Unitarian Universalism. As far as the government is concerned, we no longer exist. The church hasn't gone anywhere, but people can't legally meet. If they do, when they do, they can be arrested. Most members of the Burundi church went into exile if they could, but some actually stayed, and 10 to 20 people still meet faithfully each Sunday, including several new members. I'm moved by the commitment of our Burundi and Rwandan neighbors to continue to gather and live out our shared faith in the face of such strong persecution. Reverend Fulgence says that the work of the church now is to build community. My friend Jean Bosco Ndi Hokubwayo explains it this way. We need to foster our relationships with ourselves, with God and nature, and with others. As Francois Niragira says, all the world, all of the earth, is made in the image of God. We are called to grow further and further into that image. Here are a few more stones for our mosaic. The Unitarian Universalist Church of the Philippines, which began as a Universalist church and, at least theologically, is now much like our own churches. They have the same principles as we do, except they have one more than we do, which is their first principle. There is God, God is love. The Hungarian and Transylvanian Unitarian churches, steeped in 500 years of tradition, who gave the Western world our first dictate of religious freedom with the Edict of Torda. The British Unitarian and Free Christian churches that uphold the ideals of freedom, reason, and tolerance. The Indonesian Unitarian Church, founded 20 years ago as a radically monotheistic Christian church. Let me break that down for you. They wanted to get back to the roots of Christianity as they saw them in the Christian Bible. So they worship on Saturdays, the Sabbath as handed down to us from our Jewish cousins, and they eat only kosher meat. Jesus and the Bible hold a special place in their religion, and they believe strongly that each religion should have freedom of conscience and freedom of belief. And the final one we'll add is our American Unitarian Universalist Association and the Canadian Unitarian Council. We here in America come from the Union of the Unitarians and the Universalists in 1961. And we, with our Canadian siblings, believe in a free and responsible search for truth and in the interdependent web and in justice. So these are the larger stones in our mosaic, but it doesn't quite look complete, does it? With these larger stones, there are, of course, other stones that we could add from other countries. And then I like to imagine each of our own stones being part of this mosaic as well. So that's where your Post-it notes come in. After service, when Lucy and I go to the back of the sanctuary, we're going to bring our mosaic. And I invite you, as you leave the sanctuary this morning, to place your Post-it note stone onto our mosaic. So we've got these stones, but what's the mortar that binds us together? Two things, love and justice. As Darihun Kriam from the Kazi Hills put it, the thread that ties us together is love. And because we love, we act. Each of our stones is a different size and shape with its own color and glint. But at the heart of each of our stones, and between and among all of our stones, is love and the belief that the world needs our love. So here's one more piece of the story of Burundian Unitarian Universalism and how we are connected to these cousins of ours across so many miles. When Reverend Fulgence was in prison and his congregation was holding vigil outside the prison walls, Unitarians and Unitarian Universalists from around the world rallied with them. The International Council of Unitarians and Universalists collected money to aid Fulgence and the congregation. Tet Gallardo, a minister in the Philippines, started a petition asking for his release. People with countries that had Burundian embassies called their embassies and asked for his release and the congregation's safety. We recognized that we are bound together by our common faith and our common destiny. We are bound together by love. Later, Reverend Fulgence said that the thing that finally won his release was that the government had had too much hearing from Unitarians. So our mosaic has these many stones bound together by love and justice as one whole picture. Unitarian Universalism may look very different in one place versus another, but we are still linked together and can learn to love together. The last word goes to Diane Rollert, a minister in Montreal. Why else are we here but to show the world how people of very different perspectives can create loving community? May it be so. Amen.
Thank you for listening to this week's podcast. We would love to hear from you via email at office@ascboston.org or through our Facebook page. If you would like to support the good work of Arlington Street Church, please consider a contribution by check in the mail or through our website, ascboston.org.